In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, I went outside for a walk. I walked in the March for Justice through downtown Oceanside and was sitting listening to a discussion about Black Lives Matter. When I looked out at the ocean and saw the surf rolling in, I thought on June 6, 1944, the U.S. and Allied forces invaded Normandy. This was D-Day. But now, in 2020, it was a Black Lives Matter event. And it struck me that both those events at a beach had something else in common. They both were really about supporting and defending the Constitution of the United States against enemies, foreign and domestic. In 1944, the enemy were foreign nations. But here in 2020, the enemy of concern are people who would like to deny persons of African descent their constitutional rights here in America. It makes you feel, wow, does my life matter here? Let me tell you my story about how I feel about this Black Lives Matter. You see, I am a native of Washington, D.C., your nation's capital. And growing up in Washington, D.C., I was surrounded by the history and messages and monuments of America, the land of the free, of opportunity for all. But I knew early on there were problems. You see, my neighborhood where I grew up, it was a mostly black neighborhood because it had been a white neighborhood. But when African Americans began moving into the neighborhood, the white people moved out to the Maryland and Virginia suburbs. So the demographic of Washington, D.C. became predominantly black, and we called it the Chocolate City, surrounded by the vanilla suburbs. But my next door neighbor was an elderly white couple, German immigrants. You see, as the black families moved in, only the elderly white couples or widows or widowers were left in the neighborhood. But because my daddy was a good Baptist deacon, he ensured that we would be good neighbors. And being a good neighbor meant that I got to cut Mr. Papp's lawn for him because he was old. And some other things, being a good neighbor. But growing up in Washington, D.C., I also became aware of the civil rights movement, which indicated that blacks didn't matter as much as others because we were denied certain constitutional rights. And I watched on TV about civil rights marches and dogs and fire hoses and policemen brutalizing people. But also, in D.C., I knew what it was like to be watched because I was black. I was a suspected shoplifter, a suspected thug, hoodlum. But at the age of 10, the Great March on Washington for Jobs and Justice, where Dr. Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech, my parents, who were both D.C. public school teachers, made sure I was there. Daddy marched with the Washington Teachers Union. And he carried the sign that said, "I am a man." And that sign stayed in our garage for decades. It was a reminder that some people didn't think Black Lives Matter. My mother and godmother took me there. So I was there. And I saw all these people come, mostly black, but some whites, some Protestants, some Jews, some Catholics, were there together to try to make America be the reality that it claimed to be on paper. A few years later, I can remember when Dr. King was assassinated. And Mr. Pabst, our German immigrant next door neighbor, he came and knocked on our door and said, "Mr. Mozart, my friends out in the suburbs say that if I put Soul Brother on my windows, they won't burn our house down." So, of course, Daddy decided that I would be the one to be the good neighbor. And I took this pink glass wax and I wrote with a sponge and this pink lotion on the windows, SOULBROTA. Soul Brother. And then after I did that, I went to my father and said, "Daddy, that's not right. They killed Dr. King, and you make me write Soul Brother on a white man's house." And Daddy, in his very smooth, authoritative bass voice, said, "Son, that's what Dr. King would want you to do." I got the message. Our lives mattered. But because of our Christian faith, we expected to be as good and neighborly and cooperative as we could be. But I wanted more, and I wanted to fight more in different ways. So I did school. And I went to a school where people decided I didn't belong on campus because we are only 3% of the population at Wake Forest University. And I went to seminary. And I became a United States Navy chaplain. And as I ministered the word of Jesus Christ, I always remembered that we had been given the ministry of reconciliation. So I took the opportunities as a black chaplain to often be the speaker for Martin Luther King Day or Black Christian Month events, to always remind persons of our history. That one factor is, in 1787, there was a 3/5 compromise as part of the Constitutional Convention that Section 1, Article 1, Section, says that it's okay for persons to be in slavery, and it's okay to count them as 3/5 of a person for political purposes. That right there says we might not matter. And then there was Civil War and segregation and Jim Crow and all types of inequities. But we're still here. And I can celebrate being American, born a black American, chose to serve God and country in the United States Navy as a chaplain, and now minister throughout the United States and the world to help plant churches. And I'm often reflecting upon what will these churches do in the communities where they are. What do dynamic churches do? What will dynamic churches and followers of Jesus Christ do in response to this explosion of pain among Black Americans and many of our non-Black colleagues who realize things need to change? I'm not sure, but I'm in prayer and hope you are too. Walk with us, talk with us, listen, pray, donate, serve. God bless you real good.